It's all systems go. This is Parliament puts final touches ahead of the State of the Nation address tomorrow evening. Parliament says it has set aside more than 6 million rand for this year's State of the Nation address. President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to reflect on a wide range of political, economic and social matters within domestic and global contexts. This comes as Parliament vows to use its new joint sitting rules to prevent disruptions during the Sona this year. Part of the rules prevent MPs from interrupting the President during his State of the Nation address. Well, Professor Luke Sinwell, Sociology Department at the University of Johannesburg, joins us to weigh in further. Prof Luke, good afternoon. Thanks for your time with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Let's look 30 years into our democracy, ahead of Sona on Thursday. Even during this election year, what drives social cohesion and why is it so important for South Africa at this juncture?
Well, I think you're talking from the perspective of the ANC and the presidency, and that they would like to see social cohesion. But I think it's a limited view in terms of how we understand what is happening within society, because there's a conflict that is taking place between the elites in the country and the vast majority of people who are the working class. So I would suggest that the whole idea of social cohesion is actually a myth, unless it enables the vast majority of people living in this country to access the resources that they need to survive and for self-determination.
Thank you for setting that context. So as we look at it through the lens of how the ANC perhaps is faring in its vision of a national democratic society, how do you think social cohesion evolves beyond a moral question to one of economic redistribution, given the realities on the ground?
Well, right now, from what I understand of social cohesion and the way that it tends to be pitched by the ruling party and the mainstream political parties, I would say especially the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, is that it's pitched in such a way that social cohesion is only necessary so that we can continue on the same path that we've been on since 1996, especially. So in 1994, the Reconstruction and Development Program was adopted, which gave hope to the people that the state would deliver to the people, especially housing, safe places to live, medicine, medical care, education. But that didn't happen quickly, although there were signs at first, especially with the redistribution of housing, that might be possible. In fact, the willing buyer, willing seller approach to land undermined that. And in 1996 in particular, there was privatization, neoliberalism, growth employment and redistribution policies. And then when it was seen, especially that the state would loot in the neoliberal context, especially most notably under President Jacob Zuma, and then the failure of Eskom, it was now said that we need further privatization. And then the masses, the vast majority of people are just there for social cohesion, so that private interests and those with the wealth. In South Africa, we have 0.1% of people owning 25% of the wealth, and the poor, especially since COVID-19, the poor have continued to get poorer, and the raising of interest rates and inflation has meant that the working class suffer. And even the approach to electricity is rooted in privatization. So there's a failure of the state, a failure of privatization. The public has seen that the state cannot deliver because of the corruption and other things that are happening. But now the solution that they've come up with is more privatization, which will benefit a small number of people at the expense of the vast majority who won't be able to access safe, clean, consistent, and affordable energy. So the question of social cohesion is missing the mark because it's suggesting that there can be a kind of cohesion without reshaping who has access to the economy and to decision-making processes that affect their lives and that affect children's lives in terms of accessing decent schools and healthcare as well.
Prof. Luke, thank you for that, because it obviously leads to more questions from that insight, looking at secondary threats, gender-based violence, patriarchy, capitalism. I mean, all these add to what you've alluded to, the politics of land expropriation without compensation versus land grabs, property rights, multicultural education curriculum. There are lots of questions that then emerge on that front. And I wonder, if we just look at race relations among South Africans as well, within South Africa, given the recent July unrest report that had been published, questioning whether race then really is the issue, attitudes towards race relations in South Africa, there's issues of racial marginalization, trust, tribalism. How would you also weigh in on that front, just as we edge closer to Sona and what is expected to emerge from the president?
So I'm not entirely sure how the president will approach the issue of race. But what we know is that the relationship between race and class is inextricably intertwined. You cannot separate one from the other. So, it used to be that the key question Du Bois said was that we need to look at the color line, but the color line has become and is also the class line. So we know that you're more likely to live a shorter life, for example, if your skin is a little bit darker, and that you won't get as good of a loan, and you're less likely to have inherited money if you come from a mother or father who was a victim of apartheid. But the question of race, I think it's come up especially in schools at Stellenbosch, and with the recent issue of a man being attacked by a dog. But that feeds into the question of how Black people were dehumanized during colonial dispossession and under apartheid. And those things, just because we have a democracy, doesn't mean the attitudes of dehumanization that exist in white people's imaginations, and to a certain extent, sometimes in Black people's imagination as well, exist. So it makes Black people, like it does in the United States still, after we had, a long history of slavery in the United States, selling Black people for property. So Black people were not considered to be human beings. So we find that hasn't gone away under liberal democracies, that we're not actually living in a post-racial world, and that we still have the problem of the legacy of dehumanization, but also the attitudes amongst ordinary people that when you see an African male, you're more likely to send your dog out to attack them. Or when a white person sees a Black child coming into a pool, like we saw several months ago, they might strangle that person, but that's a legacy that they've held on to. That's the poison of white supremacy that is present and alive today with us.
And want us to then also look at it being an election year, how those relations, issue of tribalism also comes to the fore, campaigning seasons happening, safety also on that front. How would you weigh in on that, just very quickly as we wrap?
Well, I would say that it seems that the leading political parties, the main party, the ANC, and the main opposition, the Democratic Alliance, have been quite strong in terms of identifying African foreigners as part of the enemy and as a key way of garnering support for amongst voters. But I think it's a key thing that we need to watch out for. I think we do need to look at tribalism, especially in KZN, with the new Umkhonto Sizwe party, also the militancy, the kind of toxic masculinity that may come from that partially extends from from history, but also from the anti-immigration movements as well, which have taken up arms. And then we've seen the people who are usually the victims of that, the victims of the violence, who can get killed, who have their shops taken, are usually not the elites who are benefiting from the economy that the parties like the ANC and Umkhonto Sizwe say that we're going to attack white monopoly capital, but usually it's the people on the streets, and especially women, who become victims to the toxic masculinity that gets perpetuated.
Well, Prof. Luke, I know that we are monitoring developments and this conversation has only just begun, but we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you for joining us on the SABC at the Sound, for weighing in. Prof. Luke Sinwell from UJ Department of Sociology, really just looking at social cohesion as a key national priority. What does that mean for the ANC?